Good morning to you, Donald, all the way up there in Scotland, and me here down in England. So today we are going to bring forward episode 3 of a series of 3 chats that you and I have had that we have shared with society to add their view, take away from our perception, whatever people want to do. We know that we have very valid and valuable discussions on many things, but the most important thing is seeing the bigger picture for us. Would you agree on that, Donald? That we strive to see the bigger picture of what the reflection of what the world shows us is going on. Okay?
Yeah, good morning, Hazel, and thanks for that. Absolutely, and I would just like to say that, you know, these discussions have no agenda other than exploring a shared understanding, but also, you know, there've been points where we've nudged each other in a certain direction, and we've sometimes adjusted our understanding. You know, it's not about trying to say that we know it all or that we're right. It's for me, it's very much a question of exploring, you know, what's going on. And it is in pursuit of an understanding of that bigger picture.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, our paths crossed, well, probably coming up for a couple of years ago now, actually, altogether, you know, in pursuit of an answer to a problem, which, you know, we were presented with and which millions and billions of people around the planet are presented with. And that problem was a lack of abundance. And we knew somehow deep down instinctively that there was a solution to that problem. And, you know, we had to think outside of the box. We had to investigate all sorts of crazy avenues to fulfill that conviction and get to the point of understanding. So yes, absolutely, Hazel, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So so to go forward, because we're going to wrap up this short series and we will do more. And I'd just like to say, you know, stories, our personal stories are that which connect us. So without our stories, we have nothing really of substance, because we are, in a way, our story, although the bigger picture is we're much more than that. And I'd just like to address for a moment these 2 words, higher consciousness. To me, when I talk about higher consciousness, I want to define it here, is that I mean, and I'm talking to and about people who come from the mindset and the heart set that we are here to serve each other with kindness, with love, with support, without judgment, without labels, if we possibly can. So that is my perception and the way I try to live my life. Now, I follow, in essence, the teachings of Jesus Christ. He did not call himself a Catholic, a Christian even, or in any shape or form did he label his teachings. The teachings that I follow are from the Christ, not his disciples, not from the Old Testament, not even from much of the New Testament, but it is to love the Lord my God with all my heart, with all my mind, with all my soul, to love my neighbor as myself, which includes what you might label the enemy. Okay, so I want to be very clear on that. That is where I'm coming from. And although my mentor is the teachings of Jesus the Christ, his teachings, or those ancient teachings, of the golden thread through every religion on this planet, if we just take the bare bones of what the prophets and the teachers of old left behind. The rest is all mankind's making, their input, and what they have done to take that higher consciousness of those teachings to a lower form of consciousness. Now, everything is consciousness. God itself is consciousness. And mankind, there's all many levels of consciousness, frequencies, and vibrations. But what mankind has done, humanity, we've taken those teachings and we've desecrated them. I just want to make that clear. That is where I try to live from. And it's not about praying once a week, it's my whole life. I strive for my whole life to be a prayer. So I'd just like to address that before we go on with what Donald's input is going to be. And what I love about Donald is that, yes, he has these deep understandings of consciousness at many levels, but he also has done great research and comes from what many would call a realistic, objective viewpoint, if that is possible, to separate subjective from objective. So I love chatting to Donald. I really do, and I respect his knowledge, his research, and what he is about to bring to this conversation. So, Donald.
Where do we go from there?
Platform.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing, the key driver here for me in all of this is basically about truth versus deception. And
distortion. Can I say distortion? Would distortion fit?
I don't think it really matters, in so much as there can be a deliberate misrepresentation of the truth, such that it becomes, yes, distorted or deceptive.
Yeah.
But what you've talked about there in your relationship, with God, living in Christ, and so on, the Christed lights, and I mean, yes, this predicates, all of the world's major religions, and I don't want to go too heavily into that. But what I would say, and this applies from everything back when Gnosticism was hijacked by the Roman Catholic Church, right the way through, actually, to the New Age spiritual movement as well, is that you've got the bait of the genuine, teachings, which is all about our connection to higher consciousness, the fact that we are divine beings living an expression of divine consciousness here on earth. But then you have the hook inside the bait, which is actually the deception. And again, I'm not a Bible scholar, but there is so much relevance here when it comes to false idols. And it's this idea that we give our authority away. We basically deny, we disown that innate connection to source, to God, to the Christ consciousness. And instead, we start believing, and we are influenced by external authority. And this really has been my whole point in coming at this. And this was the big realization for me a few years ago, is that, that's what's essential. I have to have that connection to source. I have to act truthfully according to my connection to source. I have to be true to myself. And that's not to say that there might be occasions when somebody knows more or better than I do, and I can defer to them through choice. If I'm going in an aeroplane, I'm going to defer through choice to the authority of the cabin crew and the pilots. That is a very deliberate handing over of responsibility and authority. But when it comes to the way we live our lives, I see that a lot of the damage that has been done is by us basically renouncing our responsibility and our individual sovereignty.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all about personal ownership and being the sovereign beings that we are. And that, Donald, I'm getting to the stage now in 2020 where I can no longer make excuses for anyone from living from that place of not using their own intelligence. I just cannot. To me, we are living in very dangerous times, and I don't say that lightly. And that's why we're wanting to put this out on Facebook and social media, because we understand that we're living in dangerous times. And if people don't start to look at their own personal responsibility, from the smallest things to the larger things, then, to be honest, God help them. That's it from my point of view, Donald. God help them. We cannot pussyfoot around anymore. It's really got to a crisis point. The tipping point is here. which way are people going to go? Are they going, for example, in a very micro way, listen to this conversation from their hearts, from their intelligence that every human being has got? Or are they going to pick every little fault in what you're about to talk about? Or are they going to be open-minded and really look at it, take it on board, and use their intelligence to equate that with what is happening in our world right now, from governments, people in authority, governments, financial institutions, big corporations?
Yeah, well, there's nothing in what you said there that I can take issue with. It's, you know, it's very much a case, and I've come across this a lot. It's, I had suppose had a series of what could be called awakenings, for want of a less trite term, and we're going back 30 years. You know, when I, you know, I had intense visions and dreams and so on, in which the nature of the control system on this planet was revealed to me. So without wishing to get too personal about it, I really, really started questioning things about 30 years ago. So I've had those 30 years to do the research. And therefore what's happening now is not a surprise to me. What's going on the planet at every level is something that I've had time to mentally, emotionally, spiritually prepare for, I suppose, if I'm being completely candid about it. And what I have spent my time doing as I've come up with increased levels of awareness in certain areas, I'm not trying to say that I'm right, because there's lots of deception out there, even within the research movement, the alternative research movement. And I've fallen for a few things that I've given credence to, which I've later had to challenge and then haven't rung true. And then, you know, I've set them to one side. So basically what I'm trying to say is that if people are coming to this without ever having questioned it, then I guess it's going to be very overwhelming. But as you quite rightly say, time has run out. You know, the things that we've been warning about for all this time are now playing out in real time. They're no longer 10 years in the future. You know, the plans for all of this have been documented decades ago, so we knew what was happening. So yes, I do agree with you. You know, we've all got access to the same internet. We've all got access to the same information. And we absolutely, for the sake of ourselves and our families and our children and the future of what goes on, you know, not just in this physical realm, but, you know, in other realms as well. It's all dependent on us taking the right actions now, claiming our sovereignty and doing what has to be done.
Exactly, yeah. So let us address then, I know that you wanted to address, which is the Catholic Church. Let's get right down to the nitty-gritty of religion as opposed to spirituality.
One of the problems here is that everywhere we look at the pillars of authority that we've grown up with over millennia, in fact, we have the public relations, public-facing, sanitized version of that organization. And it doesn't matter whether that's the monarchy, whether it's the parliament, whether it's the church of any denomination, whether it's the military, you know, whether it's the aristocratic royal families and all
financial institutions. Yeah.
So my point being that there is a public-facing version of these, and then there is a behind-the-scenes version of these. Now, people often refer to, you know, the likes of the deep state, and I think that people have a subconscious niggling and an understanding that a deep state exists. But what they don't understand is that with the likes of the Catholic Church, there is also, I mean, there is a white pope and there is a black pope. There is a black nobility. There is a shadow.
That is what you mean by black, isn't it? You mean a shadow. Let's be clear on that, because people will misinterpret that. So you're talking about a truthful on the table aspect, and then there is the opposite of that, which is the shadow, which you just referred to as black. So I want to make that very clear to people that are listening, because you know what people are like.
No, no, I do. But I mean, what you have to come to terms with is that the Society of Jesus, basically the Jesuits are the organization responsible for the Catholic Church and have been for over 500 years. And if anybody wants to get an understanding of their modus operandi, then please, please go and read the Jesuits' Extreme Oath. Now, this is a document which goes back to the 1500s, which is revealed only to the highest level initiates. And this has been completely documented, revealed, and so on. And it is the most diabolical doctrine that you could ever possibly imagine. And when people talk about, you know, all these atrocities within the church happening hundreds and thousands of years ago, well, yes, they did, but there's this idea that now that everything has changed. And the real challenge that we have to waken up to is that, you know, the Black Pope, the Jesuits, are still controlling everything that goes on through the church, and their very shiny public PR and so on. So the Jesuit Extreme Oath is what actually defines all of that. The other thing that I found fascinating was that for the first time in recent history anyway, the white Pope, Francis, is actually a Jesuit as well. And they made a big deal about that when he was appointed, because nobody really knows what the Jesuits are all about. So there's such a lot to look at there, you know, in terms of who you're giving your power away to if you are, you know, deferring to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And I can only, you know, beg that people go and actually do some research on this, because their interconnected web is what controls the entire banking system, entire government, the entire legal system around, you know, the planet. And when you start looking to the United Nations as well, you find that all of the same key players are involved in that. Mm-hmm. And you end up with their agendas masquerading as, you know, protecting the planet and, you know, basically, you know, sustainability is the buzzword that's being used. That's the positive PR for the Jesuit agenda, which is also the Zionist agenda. And if anyone else wants another reference, then go and read the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Happy to provide links for these things. And then go and read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which tells us exactly how these things play out in real time and are happening now. So, you know, that's really where I'm coming from with this. And we will come full circle in relation to currency and cryptocurrency and so on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But my point here is to absolutely, you know, just people, please start taking responsibility for your own finances, your own beliefs, your own health. You know, stop relying on external governmental entities, you know, authorities to do these things for you.
I 100% agree. So I just want to go over those three references you made, because I'll put them under the video here. So we've got the Jesuits' Extreme Oath, we've got the Learned Elders of Zion, and we've got the Silent Weapons to Quiet Wars.
Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars.
For Quiet Wars, yeah. So I've made a note of those. So I'll put those underneath for people that, you know, want to research that. So we've done that. But yeah, it is about, as you say, taking full responsibility and then coming together with those people of the same mind, heart set. And because we need to take control. We know that there are those people that are very vulnerable, that will do the research, but they won't have that inner connection that gives them the strength to stand up for, you know, what we're talking about now. I totally get that. But there are many people coming together that do have the strength. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, Donald, that more and more people will start their own discussions like we're having now. Yeah. And we all come together from a sense of wealth, whether that's money, emotional intelligence, correct mindset, and a heart-based being that we are, that we all come together. And that is what's going to change the world, the people. And that's why we've got to stop looking to governments, health authorities, all of that. It's a must, everyone. You know, that is my plea to you all today. We have to take responsibility. As scary as that is, you can do it one step at a time. One small step at a time. you'll be surprised in a year where you've gotten to with all of this in a year from now, if you start taking one small step at a time. So yeah, so we're linking all of that, taking back our power, our sovereignty, which is what 2020 going forward is all about.
Yeah, absolutely, Hazel. And just bringing it round to the subject of money, I think this is really, really, really important, because just as we are socially conditioned, with unhealthy habits in lots of areas of our lives, so, the unhealthy habits that we've had, if you like, bred into us when it comes to money are things that absolutely have to be addressed. Otherwise, we are quite simply slaves. We are slaves to money rather than being empowered by money. And money is a technology, it's a tool, it's an energy. And blockchain is just exactly the same. It's a tool to be used. But one of the things which I come up against all the time, and I know that you've dealt with this, from earlier conversations that we've had, I know you've helped a lot of people with this, is this idea of what we spend our money on. When people say, or they perceive that achieving success financially is out with their reach, what it always boils down to is, well, how badly do you want that? And what are you prepared to give up?
Yeah.
And this is what I have had to do. I've had to have my own personal reckoning in my own life about my relationship with money, about the things that I spend money on, because also bear in mind that when we spend money, we are casting a vote for whomever we give that money to. So if we continue to give our money to the corrupt organizations, then we will fuel more and more of the same corruption. If we choose to give our money to the organizations who represent our beliefs and our understandings, and we want to prevail, then we're empowering them with our money. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, so you've got no capital, you may well be in debt. How on earth are you going to achieve financial success and financial independence? And the brilliant thing about the process that I've been through, and I know that you've been through as well, and that this is what I'm trying to share with my own family and friends, and very successfully, I have to say, is, think about those subscriptions, that you've got every month. What is it? Is it Amazon Prime? Is it Netflix? Is it whatever? And then start to use a compounding calculator. Look at what you can trim back on a monthly basis, weekly basis, and invest it. Do dollar cost averaging. Even if you just only do that in Bitcoin, put a little bit away. Look at your cost of living. Look at where you're living. How much is it costing you? Can you afford it? Do you need it? The cars that you've got outside, do you need them? Are they status symbols? Are they themselves false idols? Now, I'm not advocating, a kind of parsimonious mindset here, but quite the contrary. What I'm suggesting is that in order to take control and responsibility, we absolutely have to get things within our means. And then we need our capital growing for us to the point that we can then enjoy these luxuries and live in abundance, but without the debt.
Yes. So let's be clear. Can I just go back to say to people what in effect you have said? It is that this is for people that are starting out listening to us, who are in debt, who don't have a great income. And this part of the conversation is for you guys. It's like, where do I start?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you start by creating a healthy relationship with where you're at. So like Donald said, and like I said earlier, it's small steps. Look at what you subscribe to. For example, even paying, and some of you will laugh at this, but even paying 79 pence a month to Apple iCloud, do you need it? That is where you start, literally. And then you move on to, like Donald said, Netflix or TV subscriptions and all of these subscriptions. We're not saying get rid of them if your mental health relies on, for example, watching a good film and a comedy, which is so good for mental health. We're not saying that at all. We're saying look at where you're at and just start. Get rid of any iCloud subscriptions, 79p or whatever it is. It's still a waste and does not serve you. And then when you've made the money with what Donald's going to come in with is, then we're not talking about being frugal. We're about honesty and getting right relationship with money and where you're at. I just want to make that clear so that nothing is misinterpreted about what we're saying here.
Yeah, and the thing that comes with that, Hazel, is that for everybody, it's a value judgment. You know, everybody has their own values and their own priorities, and everyone has their own addictions and levels of compulsions and everything else. And I fall into all of those things and have done. But in terms of leveling up with myself, I've had to have a really, really good look at what I'm doing with my money. What am I prioritizing? What am I actually doing with this? And so there's that curtailing of expenses. There is then getting into the habit of what I've done is set up a standing order every week so that when whatever source of income comes into the bank, £100 of that goes into Coinbase. And that's what I've been doing now for a long time. And that might seem significant, but again, go and play with a compounding calculator and go and see what happens when you chip away at savings in that way. And that £100 is £100 that I've saved by not indulging in other things that are not really necessary because I've wanted to get to a point of financial independence. And that's the crucial thing. It's making that flip and that switch.
Yes, I agree. And it's not even that, it's a lot of money. I really want to emphasize this. We're not talking about people with hundreds of thousands. We're talking about us, the ordinary people. And that is where I started with my right relationship with money. Do I need this? Am I wasting my money? Because so many people do not look at their subscriptions. And like you're saying, you can put £100 or dollars a month into Coinbase, or even 20. The amount isn't the point. It's that you do it consistently, because it's amazing, truly amazing, how quickly that does compound for you to take even bigger steps forward.
Yeah. And there are two other things, Hazel, I want to touch on here when it comes to people who are starting from nothing. And bear in mind, to anyone that doesn't know me, I was fully bankrupt 3 years ago. I had a horrendous time. I ended up having to liquidate 2 companies, separation, family separation, divorce, all the rest of it. And I know what rock bottom is. I mean, I really, really do know what rock bottom is. And this isn't a lament. I'm not looking for sympathy. But it was that coming smack hard up against rock bottom that forced me, absolutely jolted me into having to come to terms with my situation, taking responsibility for it. I was no longer could I blame anybody else for my circumstances. It was all down to me. And the other thing that I did, so I started curtailing, expenditure. That's not an easy thing to do. And in the first place, it certainly wasn't. And I really struggled with that. In fact, I probably went the opposite direction for a while. It's a thing that it's your own responsibility, and you've got to take your own path, and it depends how badly you want what it is that you say you want. But also assets, non-productive assets, junk that you've got lying around in your home, in your garage, a boat on a trailer, whatever it is, what happens if you sell that? And then don't try and get a high price for it. Just sell it. Because you can double your money on that, if you invest it properly.
I've got this thing as well, which fits in nicely with what you're saying, is like, stop haggling with people. Like Donald says, if you are focused and so on, just get rid of the clutter that, is gold to somebody else. Just don't even think about, I'm going to get the highest price, because that is not higher consciousness.
No.
It truly isn't. That is greed. And let's be clear on that. Just get rid of it for a reasonable price that is fair, and then you'll be amazed at what you could get. Because for me, divine law is, don't have more than you need at any one time. But yet again, it doesn't mean we don't have a nice home. It's just, don't clutter it. Just get rid of what you do not need, what you do not love. If you don't love it, get rid of it. If it's not useful, like your blender in the kitchen, for example, or your kettle, get rid of it. And you will find that your mind is an extension of what you see in your home. If your home's cluttered up with stuff, than your mind is, and you won't have clarity. It's as simple as that to me. So yeah, you know, that is to me divine law. Don't waste food or anything. Your clothes, for example, don't waste them, recycle them. Don't throw good food away. You know, I have a thing, even if I had leftover food, and I would always take it outside for the wild animals, foxes, whatever. I would never throw leftover food into the dustbin, but I took responsibility. If that food was still there in the morning, I cleared it up, but I would not waste food in that way by just chucking it in the bin. These are simple things, but they are huge. They are huge things as well. And that's where we build a very strong foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have found myself just naturally going that way. The food's an interesting one because, you know, I own a restaurant. So I'm you know, very, very conscious of wasting food and not wanting to waste food. But it absolutely does extend to the domestic situation as well. If, you know, think about it in percentage terms of what you spend in a year, you know, on food. And let's say, for argument's sake, it's something like, you know, £7,000 a year. You know, if you throw away 10% of that, it's 700 quid. You know, that's £700 that could absolutely be, you know, trading and doubling and compounding.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, you know, we couldn't touch on a better subject, could we, as that, and seeing the compounding of it. So, for example, I've got a little story. I had a friend that when she cut up broccoli, for example, she would always throw the stem away. And I'd make her get that out of the bin. And say that is just absolute, to me, it's, I know we chuckle, but to me, it's not funny. You can put that in a stir fry. You can do so much with that, you know, and really, Donald, when people stop to think about it across the board, I don't care who we are, you know that you're throwing away good food, but you can't be bothered to utilize, like, for example, the broccoli stem into something, you know, for a meal. It's just inconvenient and people don't want to be bothered. And that's why I said in the beginning of this conversation, I have no more time for that. Yeah. I have no more time for that.
Yes. So I suppose that's the thing. I mean, if you don't have capital to start with, then what we've discussed for the last 20 minutes are the very simple, practical, but very, very challenging steps that we have to take in altering our mindset. To get out of the addiction to spending and consuming. You know, everyone talks about, you know, the consumer society and how wasteful it is, but it all starts with us. It's all an extension of our beliefs and habits. And so what we've described there, I think, you know, sums that up very well. But the other thing that I have to say to people is that, you know, if you start to look at what we've been involved in, you know, we're starting to develop our relationship with money, looking at the existing banking system or the legacy system that is incontrovertibly collapsing, deliberately so at the moment. And then you look at the emergence of genuine cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, not the facsimiles, which we'll get onto. But basically, you know, there is such an opportunity here, and people come up against different layers of disbelief where, you know, it's too good to be true. And you know, I'm very, very weary these days of hearing this, although I understand it. But the reality of the situation is that there is more than enough money in the world. Absolutely more than enough money, more than enough food, more than enough water, more than enough of absolutely everything to sustain life on the planet. So what we have got access to through our own pioneering, I suppose, for want of another word maybe, over the past few years, is to use technology to access wealth in order to provide the means of independence and autonomy to anybody that wants it badly enough to make changes in their daily lives and embrace the new possibilities. And, you know, that it's like taking they've got all this currency, and the water analogy or metaphor works very well. They've got it all together. It's all in a reservoir and the desert all around them. And that's quite deliberate. And what we've done is find a way of getting a hose pipe into that reservoir and actually starting to water the desert with the money that they have stolen from the people and the planet.
I love that. Yeah, we found a way in through the back door, if you like,
Yeah,
because I love that because you know, like with Bitcoin and forex trading, we are small fry compared, but we're doing our best to increase and increase and increase for the good of everybody. But we are small fry. But Donald, there are thousands upon thousands of us small fry
yeah,
coming up to getting thousands upon thousands of dollars and pounds
yeah,
into our hands, and
yeah,
all of us together underneath the surface,
yeah.
all right, we
Yeah.
are going to make a huge difference. Because I don't know if it's appropriate to touch on this here, because we know, don't we, of the hierarchy of the financial system. You know,
Mhm.
that video that I sent to you and how
Absolutely.
that works. Because once we start getting, like, say, 60,000, 100,000 pounds, dollars or more, we are flagged in the banking system by a code.
Mm.
You know, and so this is what you're talking about, you know, the shadow side of the banking system, but they don't tell anyone. So it's fascinating, it's abominable, and I can't stop smiling, but we found a way in. Thanks to good companies that
Yeah,
you and I are very familiar with. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Hazel. I mean, and that's what it's about. One of the other things that people get very challenged by, you know, when it comes to the idea of trading is, I think they've been led to believe that somehow by them profiting, that someone else is losing
Yes.
money,
Yes.
that it's a zero-sum game, that there actually isn't enough, and that by that, you know, that by us drawing down profits from trading, that we are somehow depriving somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, this is the absolute perfect example of Stockholm syndrome to the banking system, because they are the ones who have been systematically extracting and extorting the wealth from the people and from the planet for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So all we are doing is reclaiming a percentage of that wealth in order to enrich our lives, become empowered, become independent and autonomous, and actually be able to create the new system, which is what
Yeah.
has to happen when this old system collapses.
Yeah. So at the moment, to reiterate over that, we are in transition from the old, which is collapsing, which is traditional banking for us, you know, small folk. That's traditional banking, that they do the same as what Donald and I now do, but they give us a pittance back. That is, we're transitioning from that system into a new system that gives us sovereignty and more control, not complete control yet, but more control over our own money without us being penalized or flagged up in this hierarchical system. Because no matter whether you like it or not, every system is a hierarchy. Even divine laws have a hierarchy. That's the truth of it. And we'll go into that perhaps in another discussion. But yeah, that's absolutely, absolutely, John. Yeah. So coming now to, I think we've kind of had a good chat about that. So we've talked about if you've got no money and you're in debt, the best way forward. Simple steps. Don't overthink it. Just simple steps. And then to these platforms and companies that Donald and I have access to. So we're not just talking, we're just not opening our mouths and blowing out a lot of hot air. We actually are linked to companies and platforms that so far have shown that they are here for the good of the little people. That's you and me listening to this and me. So we have that, because intentions are all very well, prayer is all very well, but that is all subjective, and you've got to put some meat on the bones where the rubber meets the road, all these lovely phrases, and have an actual bricks and mortar, in inverted commas, online company that does this for us, because we don't do it ourselves. Is that correct, Donald?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we've touched on this business of debt as well. And to anyone who becomes familiar with the way that the economy has been deliberately structured, it's been very much a case of trying to ensure that everybody is in debt somehow or other,
Yeah.
and that debt is securitized or collateralized against assets. Now, one of the most challenging aspects of what's going on at the moment with the global reset, which is the brainchild of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and his cohorts, people, please, please, please investigate the Great Reset, because what they're attempting to do here is to create dependency upon the state.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say the state, what I really mean is the interconnected web of global corporations.
Yeah.
Because we no longer have, if we ever actually did, a genuine government that represents the people. They're entirely bought and paid for by the global corporations, who are quite honestly working together to bring about their new world order.
Yeah.
Their words, not mine.
Yeah. So, Donald, can I come in here? We're talking about these huge global corporations. Now, we're talking about Facebook, are we? We're talking about Netflix, those kinds of companies. This is what we mean, to be clear to people. These are the huge corporations that are influencing this.
Yeah, that they are, that they're a good example. The Silicon Valley giants certainly are, but you also have to look towards the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and actually the philanthropic so-called organizations, the likes of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the likes of the Clinton Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Trust, all of these people who, in the guise of humanity, or advancing the causes of humanity, have been acquiring massive amounts of wealth, which are being used to create the New World Order. And they've been absolutely candid in their own discussion and exposure of this terminology and the United Nations agendas, which are designed to bring about a digitally controlled population. Yeah. And the vaccine agenda ties in absolutely with this. There will be digital implants that come through, mandatory vaccinations, unless we all say no.
Yeah. True. And then we've got, as you say, the vaccinations, the money system, cashless society. That is a huge thing, and it's happening now. It's not about to happen, people. They are stopping us using cash. Slowly. You know, the metaphor of the frog in the hot water just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and before you know it, the frog's dead. It is happening now. It's not to come. I can't emphasize it enough. This cashless society and the vaccinations.
So the next part of the agenda that's playing out here, and it's hitting the UK very hard actually at the moment. China has basically had their way with Australia, New Zealand. That they were some of the first, but it's hitting the UK now, and basically what they're doing is collapsing the economy quite deliberately. And I've been saying this back since March as the owner of a small business. What I've seen is the absolute systematic creation of dependency upon government handouts in order to keep your business afloat, keep your staff employed, but not enough money to pay your overheads, so the business will eventually go down the tubes. You will then become dependent on the state. And in order to receive state funding, you will have to acquiesce to their program. Now, there will be debt forgiveness that comes along with this. Debts will be forgiven, but assets will be seized, and you will then have to sign up to the vaccination schedule. And at that point, you will have handed over your rights to human sovereignty. Yeah. And people might think that sounds all woo-woo and out of order or whatever. Please do your research if you don't understand what I'm saying.
They only have to Google the straw man, don't they, to get started on that. Just Google the straw man to start your research on what Donald and I are talking about. So it's the shadow side of the world, because we do live in duality consciousness. That's a given. That's reality. That's not woo-woo. And duality consciousness means the opposites. All the time, we are experiencing the opposites: abundance, lack, good, evil. That's what I mean. And that goes on in this world. So even though we have spoken about the dark side of all of this, there is also a really, really good side and a really positive side. So we've really outlined the shadow side. And the good side is that if we take on our own personal responsibility, we start in small steps, then we will change the direction, the timeline that we're on in this 3D world takes. And that is the good side. And that means there is abundance for everyone. There is enough, and everyone will have a house, a small garden, enough food, education, and enjoy the good things in life. That is there too, everyone. So let's not leave that out.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that it's so important. But what I find a lot of people doing, and we'll leave the shadow side after this comment.
Yeah.
But what I find a lot of people doing is that they're naively optimistic with a whimsical desire to see the utopia. But that cannot be achieved until we have claimed our own sovereignty. As long as people are expecting the government to provide this, you know, or their political party to provide it for them, or the local authority to provide it for them, or any other tier of external authority, they will only ever end up in dystopia. Mm-hmm. It is that point at which we take personal responsibility, take our own decisions, and act accordingly. Mm-hmm. And this is the point that I feel we're at now. It's very well to discuss these things. It's very well to share anecdotes and memes on social media and so on. But now is the time for action. Mm-hmm. The talking's time's done. We don't have time left. No, we don't. Are getting to that stage where the water has been going down the plug hole and it's about to disappear. Yeah. You know, that you know, there's no stopping it. And so
and that's our nature, isn't it? You know, we call it, oh, everything changes at the last minute, but really we need to get to the last minute to be in the now, because we can only change things in the now. And humans like to say, why do things have to get so bad? Why do we have to be between a rock and a hard place? Because that's what it takes for us to bend the knee and not be so rigid and resistant and controlling, and to go with the flow, in effect. But people need to be taught how to think, don't they, Donald? Would you agree? All of us need to be taught how to think.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think critical analysis is something that is just not present in the curriculum at schools. We've touched on this previously in a discussion. But fundamentally, it's not even just about that. It's about, and it goes back to the original point of the discussion, which is us as creators, us as individual representations of divine being here on earth. We are creators. And so if we acknowledge the fear, we acknowledge the danger, we don't need to buy into it. And we can replace those things with our own conviction and our own determination about the world that we want to create. And this is where it gets biblical. This is where it is the wheat from the chaff. Yeah. This is actually what it's all about. Mm-hmm. You know, are you going to worship false idols? Are you going to give your power away? Or are you going to be true to yourself? Mm-hmm. And this is my point, and my battle cry here is that we are God. Yeah. We are God. Call it higher consciousness, call it source, call it divine spirit, call it whatever you like. Yeah. We are God, and we are creators, and we have it, the power to create the alternative to the hell on earth that they are trying to take us to.
But okay, and so I think this is a really good place to finish, because the hour is up. And yeah, just to finish on that, we are magnificent creators. We've created a magnificent mess. We've created magnificent chaos. And when you look at it without emotion, when you step right back, you can see, wow, what a mess we created. We are true artists. So now let's create the opposite. That's it. That is it. We are so good at creation. We create the perfect war, the perfect disease, the perfect lack, the perfect everything. And now let's create perfect harmony, perfect world for humanity. That's it. And I think, Donald, that is a great threshold for our next discussion, creating the perfect world as opposed to the one we've created perfection for sure. but it's, you know, the opposite of what we believed we wanted. And so I'm really eager to get into the money system, because I think that's where it starts. Because we can have all of these chats in the world, as you say, Donald, but until we help people, it's the money that will support us to do what needs to be done. You know, is that your stance as well going forward?
Well, it's an essential ingredient. You can't have autonomy and sovereignty without access to wealth.
Yeah.
As long as you're dependent on someone else paying your wages, you have no autonomy. You cannot, therefore your actions are compromised.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's been deliberately, done that way. And the systems that we're working with, the companies we're involved in, have been very, very deliberately set up to remedy that dependency.
To do the
and that is what is absolutely crucial and very exciting, actually, about what's going on.
It is, actually, you're right. So we come full circle with a smile. We've said all that we've said, for however anyone wants to interpret that, and we've come full circle, and now we're ready to share what we know to be true, not just airy fairy woo woo higher consciousness, which is true to me, but where the rubber meets the road. We know it to be true because we've done it. To ordinary human beings, ordinary, like all of you, but we're also extraordinary human beings. And so I'd like to bring it to an end there. Have you got anything you want to share in the last moment or two?
No, other than to thank you very much for engaging me in these discussions. It's fun, actually.
It is fun, yeah.
It's great to be connecting with somebody who has, an understanding, and to be developing each other's understanding. And this is what's absolutely critical, because I don't know if you remember back at the very start of the first one of these we were talking about blind spots. And, I'm still, I'm sure of my convictions in many areas, but I know I've still got blind spots. And so I'm depending on people like you, Hazel, to reflect things back to me. And, I'll come away from this and I'll think about some of the things you've said, and I'll consider if there might be areas that I could learn from. So it's very much a healthy, ongoing discussion, which I really, really appreciate.
Okay. Lots of love, Donald. Thank you, everyone who's listened in. I'm going to put the links underneath of the things that Donald mentioned. And if you want to get in touch with Donald or me, we'll put those links underneath as well. So, bye, everybody.